Welcome back to Cupcake's Lullaby. I will be continuing Chapter 7, The Marriage. At 5 o'clock, Max and Valerie were in the basement sipping coffee. You better get right to bed, Valerie said. You look all troubled. You can't stay up all night if you were a pup. As if you were a pup. I'm not tired, Max said, but you're right about the other. Tell Mama. Valerie crossed to him, stroked his hair where his hair had been. It's just been I remembering about the pill. It was a beautiful pill, honey. Feel proud. I think I messed up the amounts, though. They didn't want an hour. When I decided the recipe, I didn't do enough. I don't think it'll work over 40 minutes. Valerie moved into his lap. Let's be honest with each other. Sure, you're a genius. But even a genius gets rusty. You were 3 years out of practice. 40 minutes will be plenty. I suppose you're right. Anyway, what can we do about it? Down is down. The pressure you've been under, if it works at all, it'll be a miracle. Max had to agree. He had to agree with her. A phantasmagoria, he nodded. The man in black was nearly stiff when Physic reached the wall. It was almost 5 o'clock, and Physic had been carrying the corpse the whole way from Miracle Max's back street to back street, alley to alleyway, and it was one of the hardest things he had ever done. Not taxing, he wasn't even winded, but if the pill was just what it looked like, a chocolate lump, then he, Physic, was going to have a lifetime of bad dreams of bodies growing stiff between his fingers. When he was last in the wall shadow, he said to Inigo, "What now? We've got to see if it's still safe. There might be a trap waiting. It is the same part of the wall that led shortly to the zoo, in the farther corner of the castle grounds. But if the albino's body had been discovered, then who knew what was waiting for them?" "Should I go up then?" Physic asked. "We'll both do it," Inigo replied. "Lean him against the wall and help me." Physic tilted the man in black so that he was in no danger of falling, and waited while Inigo jumped onto his shoulders. Then Physic did the climbing. Any crack in the wall was enough for his fingers. The least imperfection was all he needed. He climbed quickly, familiar with it now, and after a moment Inigo was able to grab hold of the top and say, "All right, go back down." So Physic returned to the man in black and waited. Inigo crept along the wall in dead silence. Far across he could see the castle entrance, and the armed soldiers flanking it. And closer at hand was the zoo, and off in the deepest brush in the farthest corner of the wall he could make out the still body of the albino. Nothing changed at all. They were at least so far safe. He gestured down to Physic, who scissored the man in black between his legs, began the arm climb noisily. When they were all together on the wall top, Inigo stretched out the dead man, then hurried along until he could get a better view of the main gate. The walk from the outer wall to the main castle gate was slanted slightly down. Not much of an incline, but a steady one. There must be, Inigo did a quick count, at least 100 men standing at ready. And the time must be, he estimated closely, 5 after 5 now. Perhaps close to 10. 50 minutes till the wedding. Inigo turned then and hurried back to Physic. "I think we should give him the pill," he said. "It must be around 45 minutes till the ceremony. That means he's only got 15 minutes to escape with." Physic said, "I think we should wait at least 5:30, half before, half after." "No," Inigo said, "we're going to stop the wedding before it happens. But it's the best way, at least to my mind, before they're all set in the hustle and bustle beforehand, and that's when we should strike." Physic had no further rebuttal. "Anyway," Inigo said, "we don't know how long it takes to swallow something like this. I could never get it down myself, I know that." We'll have to force feed him," Inigo said, wrapping the chocolate-colored lump, "like a stuffed goose. Put our hands around his neck and kind of push it down into whatever comes next." "I am with you, Inigo," Physic said. "Just tell me what to do." "Let's get him into the sitting position, I think, don't you? I always find it easier swallowing sitting up than lying down." "We'll have to really work at it," Physic said. "He's completely stiff by now. I don't think he'll bend easy at all." You can make him, Inigo said. I always have confidence in you, Physic. Thank you, Physic said. Just don't ever leave me alone. He pulled the corpse between them and tried to make him bend in half. But the man in black was so stiff, Physic really had to perspire to get him to the right angles. How long do you think we'll have to wait before we know if it's a miracle or not? Your guess is as good as mine, Inigo said. Get his mouth as wide open as you can and tilt his head back a little and we'll just drop it in, see? Physic worked at the dead man's mouth a while, got it the way Inigo said. Tilted the neck perfect for the first time. And Inigo knelt directly over above the cavity, dropped the pill down. As it hit the throat, he heard, "Couldn't beat me alone, you dastards. Well, I beat each apart. I'll beat you both together. You're alive," Physic cried. The man in black sat immobile, like a ventriloquist dummy, just his mouth moving. That is perhaps the most childly observational remark I've ever come across. But what can you expect from a stranger? Strangler. Ugh. Why won't my arms move? You've been dead, Inigo explained. And we're not strangling you, Physic explained. We're just getting the pill down. The resurrection pill, Inigo explained. I bought it from Miracle Max, and it works for 60 minutes. What happens after 60 minutes? Do I die again? It wasn't 60 minutes. He just thought it was. Actually, it was 40. Only they used up one already in the conversation, so it was down to 39. We don't know. Probably you just collapse and need tending for a year or however long it takes to get your strength back. I wish I could remember what it was like when I was dead, the man in black said. I'd write it all down. I could make a fortune on a book like that. I can't move my legs either. That will come. It's supposed to, Max said. The tongue and the brain were shoo-ins, and probably you'll be able to move, but slowly. Last thing I remember was dying. So why am I on this wall? Are we enemies? Have you got names? I'm the dread Pirate Roberts, but you can call me Wesley. Physic. Inigo Montoya of Spain. Let me tell you what's been going on. He stopped and shook his head. No, he said, there's too much. It would take too long. Let me distill it for you. The wedding is at 6, which leaves us probably now something over half hour to get in. Steal the girl, get out, not before I kill Count Rugen. What are our liabilities? There is but one working castle gate and is guarded by perhaps 100 men. Wesley said, not as unhappy as he might have been ordinarily, because he had just begun to be able to wiggle his toes. And our assets? Your brains, physics, strength, my steel. Wesley stopped wiggling his toes. That's all? That's it? Everything? The grand total? Inigo tried to explain. We've been operating under terrible time pressure from the very beginning. Just yesterday morning, for example, I was hopeless drunk and Physic toiled with the brute squad. It's impossible, Wesley cried. I am Inigo Montoya, and I do not accept defeat. You will think of something. I have complete confidence in you. She's going to marry Humperdinck, and I'm helpless, Wesley said in blind despair. Lay me down again. Leave me alone. You're giving in too easy. We fought monsters to reach you. We risked everything because you have the brains to conquer problems. I have complete and absolute total confidence that you... I want to die, Wesley whispered, and he closed his eyes. If I had a month to plan, maybe I could come up with something, but this... His head rocked from side to side. I'm sorry. Leave me. You just moved your own head, Physic said, doing the best to be cheery. Doesn't that up your spirits? My brains, your strength, and his steel against 100 troops. And you think a little head jiggle is supposed to make me happy? Why don't you leave me to death? This is worse, lying here helpless while my true love marries my murderer. I just know that you're over your emotional outburst you'll come up with. I mean, even if we had a wheelbarrow, that would be something, Wesley said. Where did we put that wheelbarrow the albino had? Inigo asked. Over by the albino, I think, Physic replied. Maybe we can get a wheelbarrow, Inigo said. Well, why don't you list that among our assets in the first place, Wesley said, sitting up and staring at the massed troops in the distance. You just sat up, Physic said, still trying to be cheery. Wesley continued to stare at the troops, with an incline leading down toward them. He shook his head. What I'd give for a Holocaust cloak, he said then. There we can help you, Inigo said. Will this do? Physic wondered. pulling out his Holocaust cloak. Where? Inigo began. Well, you were after frog dust, Physic answered. It fit so nicely I just tucked it away and kept it. Wesley got to his feet. All right, then. I need a sword eventually. Why? Inigo asked. You can barely lift one. True, Wesley agreed, but it's hardly common knowledge. Hear me now. There are many problems once we're inside. I'll say that there may be problems, Inigo cut in. How do we stop the wedding? Once we do, how do I find the Count? Once I do, where do I find you again? Once we're together, how do we escape? Once we escape. Don't pester him with so many questions, Physic said. Take it easy. He's been dead. Right. Sorry, Inigo said. The man in black was moving very slow along the top of the wall. By himself, Physic and Inigo followed. Through the darkness in the direction of the wheelbarrow, there was no denying the fact that there was a certain excitement in the air. Buttercup, for her part, felt no excitement whatsoever. She had, in fact, never remembered such a wonderful feeling of calm. Her Wesley was coming. That was her world. Ever since the prince had dragged her to a room where she had spent the intervening hours thinking of ways to make Wesley happy, there was no way he could miss stopping her wedding. That was the only thought that could survive the trip across her conscious mind. So when she heard the wedding was to be moved up, she wasn't the least upset. Wesley always prepared for contingencies, and if he could rescue her at 6, he could just as happily rescue her at 5:30. Actually, Prince Humperdinck got things going even faster than he had hoped. It was 5:23 when he and his bride-to-be were kneeling before the aged Archdeacon of Florin. It was 5:24 when the Archdeacon started to speak. It was 5:25 when the screaming started outside the main gate. Buttercup only smiled softly. Here comes my Wesley now, was all she thought. It was not a point, in fact, her Wesley, that was causing the commotion out front. Wesley was doing all he could to simply walk straight down the incline toward the main gate without help. Ahead of him, Inigo struggled with the heavy wheelbarrow. The reason for its weight was that Physic stood in it, arms wide, eyes blazing, voice booming in terrible rage. I am the dread pirate Roberts, and there will be no survivors, he said. That over and over, his voice echoing and reverberating as his rage increased. He was standing there, gliding down the darkness, quite an imposing figure, seeming all in all probably close to 10 feet tall, with a voice to match, but even that was not the cause of the screaming. Yellen, from his position by the gate, was reasonably upset at the roaring giant gliding down toward them in the darkness. Not all that he doubted his 100 men could dispatch the giant. The upsetting thing was that, of course, the giant would be aware of that too, and logically there must have been somewhere in the dimness out there any number of giant helpers, other pirates, anything who could tell. Still, the men held together remarkably staunchly. It was only when the giant got halfway down the incline that he suddenly, happily burst into flames and continued his trip, saying, No survivors, no survivors, in a manner that could only indicate deadly sincerity. It was seeing him happily burning and advancing that started the brute squad into screaming. And once that happened, why, everybody panicked and ran. And there is a burning giant. And that leaves us to the final chapter, chapter 8, The Honeymoon. Which is the shortest chapter in the book. And I will pick it back up later.